Hello, namaste, buenos dias. It is my great pleasure to welcome everybody to this final panel in the 7th International Conference and Gathering of Elders of Ancient Traditions, organized by the ICCS International Center for Cultural Studies. And I'm really happy that I have had the privilege to be part of all the 7 conferences that started in 2003. And every time it has been a great, enjoyable, enlightening experience. And it has increased my conviction that the ancient traditions have answers to all the modern day problems that humanity is faced with. In the past 2 days, this conference, the first virtual conference that took place in 3 time zones, and many of us who have attended possibly all the 3 zones, we must have felt uplifted by the great sacred music, ceremonies, prayers, speeches, and discussions on how to take the message of the ancient traditions to the entire world. In this panel, which is the final and a very important panel, because it is about the youth and how the youth can take forward this message. So it is about our present and the future, and how the youth can become the champions of the ancient tradition, the wisdom for the sake of humanity. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the moderator of this session, Mr. David Cortez, who is from Colombia. He lives in Villa de Leyva. He has a PhD in Theory and History of Arts from Jacobs University in Germany, and he is a full-time teacher at the UPTC University in the field of education. David, his work and life has been positively permeated by this incredible territory where he has been able to conciliate theoretical research with fieldwork, allowing him to slowly get involved with the local community. He has recently begun a project aiming to make visible and safeguard the indigenous textile traditions of that region. In addition, he has founded the line of inquiry, Digital Migration of Knowledge, and a PhD program in Society and Education at the LaSalle University. I think it's very important that not only activism, but all the issues like climate change, disparity, social inequality, the need for dignity to all the traditions. I think for that, grassroots efforts are needed, volunteer efforts are needed. ICCS is largely a volunteer effort throughout the world, and it is gaining momentum in all the countries. Again, welcome everybody to this final panel in this conference, and I would like to ask David to take over and take us through this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sumitra. Welcome everyone to this closing session of the 7th ICCS International Conference and Gathering for the Elders. It is a great pleasure to be moderating this panel entitled Indigenous Youth Channeling Ancestral Wisdom. We have 5 young leaders who will inform us on an array of burning themes in social development, climate activism, education, arts, and sustainability from a perspective which I believe is not only seeking the preservation of ancestral values, but is also seeking a cross-fertilization between past and present. Today, Dr. Joshua Burgada will be opening the ceremony. Dr. Joshua Allison Burbank, it's a Diné and a Coma Pueblo. He's a speech-language pathologist at Northern Navajo Medical Center and owner of Little Moccasins Education Services. He's an adjunct lecturer in the Communication Sciences and Disorders program at the University of Vermont. His clinical and research interests include community assessment and engagement, parent coaching, cultural responsive teaching practices, and prevention of developmental delay in American Indian children. He also practices traditional planting, irrigation, and seed banking. So, Dr. Burbank, you may now begin the opening ceremony. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you for having me. Joshua Allison Burbank in Asia, Kluganishla, Kizani Bashashi, Tohana Dashache, Kizani Dashanella, Akut Ego Denenishla. Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing me the space and time to open us up in a positive way. And I first wanted to start by acknowledging my children and open up with the prayer and the language of their people as well. And so this is an acknowledgement of child development, of their environment, the climate, and also for strength moving forward, that children grow in a way that in which they're connected with the earth and connected with their traditional ways, their language, and also are advocates for their community and others, Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike. So dawa e naya naishia, dawa ayucha, dawa e mayuna tsatsi, dawa atitani, hina ba game mayuna tsi shabasti, haye ya ucha drami nawa avucha, shkwawi dramu manishi, dawa e tsikana, mayuna gume e hashtame, juwe shots. I acknowledge all the people here that's joining us today. I acknowledge the children from their communities. I acknowledge all the beings, the animals, the plants, everything that gets us to where we're at today. And hopefully these words of my children sets us up in a good way for us to have this conversation about how to empower Indigenous youth and how to brainstorm and how to come together as Indigenous people across the Americas to share this knowledge and how we can empower our young children to make change, to be agents of change, to protect the earth, to protect their communities, and to protect our ways of life. So thank you for allowing me this time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Burbank. Now, instead of introducing each of our participants at once, we will do it one by one before each question. And I would like to begin with a very open and general question. What is health? What does it mean to live in a healthy society? So I would like to have your take in this matter. Dr. Burbank, could you please tell us, what do you think is health?
I think health is a word or a concept that comes from a Euro-American culture in which it's defined as mostly mental and body. For Indigenous perspectives of health and wellness, we have to think about those two things, health and wellness, our body, our mind, our spirit, how we think. In many Indigenous cultures, we have multiple senses, multiple areas of our body and our mind in which we have to think of. And later on, we're going to talk about what can contribute to chronic health disease or poor health in Indigenous communities. We have to expand our definition of what health means. It's not just about the body. It's not just about the mind. It's also about our emotions. It's about our breath. It's about our dreams. It's about our goals. That's health. And so I think hopefully today we can expand that definition or that concept of what it means to be healthy, what it means to be well in today's society.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this expanded definition of what health is. Now, I would like to ask the same question to Kiana. Kiana is a Navajo and Hawaiian who grew up on the Navajo Reservation in Arizona, United States. She holds a Master of Science in Public Health, in environmental toxicology, and Public Policy from the Johns Hopkins University. She currently works as an epidemiologist and environmental scientist, and is also on the board of directors for two mutual aid groups, which serve native tribes across North America. So, Kiana, what is your take on this matter? What do you think health is?
First of all, I just want to also introduce myself in my native language as well. Yat e shi e kiana kla ikini yenishia ashihe nishle Hawaiian Bashichin Totsani Dashiche Hawaiian Dutchanella Akut Egots on Indigenous Nishle. And this is how I introduced myself as an Indigenous woman. Like Joshua, I'm also part Navajo as well. As you had said, I have grown up on the Navajo reservation, and I identify very closely with the Navajo culture as well. So a lot of my perspectives on the definition of health really echo what Joshua stated as well, in that the DSM version of health is just so short-sighted in how Indigenous cultures view it. Like in the Navajo culture and the Hawaiian culture, having a full life is considered more such as wellness, because health is just so siloed into like physical and mental health. And of course, you have to consider, like Joshua said, your emotional and spiritual health. And in our culture, that means like, what is your connection to your kinship? What's your connection to your community, to the environment, and to yourself as well? And I really hope that we can also expand on that today in this session.
Thank you so much. Next question will be directed to Shia Bastida. She's a Mexican-Chilean climate activist, member of the Indigenous Mexican Otomi Toltec Nation. She's co-founder of Re-Earth Initiative, which mobilized thousands of people to take part in a global digital protest. She's also one of the major organizers of Fridays for Future, especially in New York City, protesting, as you all know, against the lack of action in this climate crisis. So Xie has been a real leading voice for youth, for Indigenous youth, and also for immigrant visibility and climate activism. So I would like to ask the following to Xie. I imagine it is hard to fight skepticism regarding climate change and new models of education. How do you mobilize people? How do you connect with them so they are more open to try new ways of communicating and relating to each other?
Well, thank you so much for the introduction and for having me here today. And I think what you ask is very important, because our methods of communication have changed as our activism has developed in the youth climate movement. So at first, I saw that my peers were taking a very aggressive approach. They were saying, "You have stolen our future. Your generation failed us," and it was very divisive generationally. And obviously, taking into account the pain that my generation is feeling every day, that our future is more at stake and our children's future is more at stake. But at the same time, it's all of ours. It's all of our planet. It's all of our health. It's all of our collective, home. So I decided that I wanted to bring that perspective into the movement, a perspective of love and reciprocity and cooperation, because we are youth and we don't have leverage in all of these different systems of power that actually have the ability to enact change, even though our voice is powerful. So we have to use it in a constructive way. So the way in which we have changed our communication tactics is to be more inclusive, more intersectional, tell people that whatever their talent is, whatever their area of expertise is, they can use it to be part of the solution. That we need to use this as not something to get upset and channel negative energy into, but actually it's an opportunity for radical change, an opportunity for creativity, an opportunity for imagination. Because at the end of the day, the climate crisis is a problem that has many solutions. And all of us bring individual solutions that connect with one another. So that is how our communications tactics have changed. to be more inclusive and to have this underlying message of reciprocity for Mother Earth.
Thank you so much, Shia, for introducing us to this constructive and creative tactics. I think this is a beautiful, beautiful subject. And well, I want to remind also the people who are joining us all around the world that you can send your questions and inquiries via chat. And at the end of the session, we will be answering your questions. So now that we are talking about education and we're talking about ways to make the message spread, I would like to direct my attention to Jorge and Canyon. First, I'm going to ask the question, and then I'm going to introduce these two panelists. Our education system seems to divide subjects: mathematics, geography, arts. All are seen as if they were independent fields. How are arts, music, medicine experienced by the Dine, by the Olone, by the Toltec, by the Anatolian? And now I'm going to introduce our panelists, our two next panelists. Jorge Gutierrez, he holds a master's degree in sustainable development. He is currently a PhD candidate in geography from Universidad Nacional de Colombia, and he has 14 years of experience in the environmental sector. He has been a consultant for the United Nations Development Program, International Development Research Center of Canada, IDRC, and the Nature Conservancy, TNC. Currently, he works at FAO coordinating climate change issues for Colombia. He worked with indigenous communities in the Colombian Amazon for a development project for 5 years. He is part of the research network on indigenous music in Colombia. And now, please let me introduce Canyon. Canyon root etsa Constanoan Olone Mustans and Shumash public speaker. I'm sorry if I mispronounced all that, and consultant. Canyon also goes by her given name, native name, Coyote Woman. With a background in web design, interactive media, Canyon has been using her knowledge of indigenous insights and leadership to initiate and facilitate conversations that bridge the gap between indigenous pedagogies and corporate and state entities. She's the CEO of Canyon Consulting. Canyon has spoken, given land acknowledgements, keynotes, and talks at venues including the 2020 UN Youth Summit for the UN Ocean Decade, among many others. So I'm going to ask the question once more. Our education system seems to be divided. How are arts, music, medicine experienced by the native people? How is ancient wisdom helping us in order to put all this together? Any of you can, John, Jorge?
If you like, can you?
Mishmin Tuhis, Conrakat Canyon, Coyote Woman, Sarah's Roots. I am daughter of tribal chairwoman Anne Marie Sayers of Indian Canyon. Indian Canyon Nation is the only federally recognized Indian country in the Bay Area known as Ohlone Territory, and that in itself is a misnomer. So in our education system and in my experience in navigating today's Western settler colonial environment, when we separate these things, and when we as humans in modern day society try to separate ourselves from these ecological systems, it actually turns into an issue. I say that given that grounding myself in recognizing the privilege I have in being raised in the land of my ancestors and being brought up where I was raised in traditional and intertribal upbringing, where indigenous protocol and culture sharing is a fundamental way of life and an everyday occurrence in my environment. I recognize that if we honor indigenous pedagogies and if we honor our ancestors, our elders and our ancestors, we can strategize sustainable futures. Now that means we need to take steps towards decolonization and re-indigenization. These are modern day contemporary terms about just questioning how things came to be the way they are, to honor truth in history, or the way my mother puts it, to honor the past to shape the future, and reapproach and take strategic steps going forward in considering how our actions and our words not only impact our family, our community, our environment, but the next 7 generations. That sometimes means saying no to the quarter end dividends. It means saying no to that idea that would help us in our survival or our decision making in the modern day, where sometimes some of our decisions are trauma informed or engaged in a scarcity model. Some of us will make decisions because we are on survival mode. All of us are deeply impacted by colonization. As a California Indigenous two-spirited individual, when I see non-Indigenous people gravitate to Indigenous spirituality, I honestly believe it's their own ancestors calling them home. Because if you think about it, all of us, all of our elders, all of our ancestors, all have Indigenous lineages from the land that they come from. And all of our ancestors have earth-based spiritual practices. And we all have been given the responsibility to be good ancestors in training. And so everything is connected. I say in today's Western settler colonial mindset, our education system is absent-minded of the sacred. It is very primitive. It reacts quickly and doesn't consider how its actions or words impact going forward. And it is frustrating because when we are brought up in that environment, our education system separating math, separating arts, we then have, I'll use my community, my culture as an example. We have teachers saying, oh, let's let the kids do little Native American arts and crafts because it's fun and artistic. That dismisses traditional ecological knowledge. That dismisses Indigenous science. That dismisses sacred geometry. That dismisses reciprocal, humble, and accountable relationship building and understanding to our integral connection to sacred living systems. I mean that by, with basket weaving, our elders know how to tend the land and have a relationship with the living beings. When I visit classrooms of 3rd graders, I joke and say, I get to talk to 3rd graders about genocide of California, waves and waves of genocide, because our education system hasn't talked about accountability. And when we are not given all that information, people come to assumptions about Indigenous peoples as Native American, hunter-gatherer, primitive, dirty. You wouldn't have the technology we have today had outsiders come in and civilized you. Yet if we think about it, if our technology, our batteries, our generators, our internet was taken away from us right now, just ripped away, could you survive 5 days without it? Could you survive a month? Do you know edible and medicinal plants? Have you heard the stories from your elders? Have you learned from your environment? Have you listened to the land? And I try and bring that perspective in. So I have fun with humor to bring that concept in. It's very challenging because we have to break apart everything we've been taught and reapproach it in a more humble, accountable, reciprocal fashion, because my elders and my community has voiced to me, the animals, the plants and the animals, they're the first people of the earth. We as humans, we came last, and we have been given the responsibility to take care of the earth. We need to be good stewards of the land, and we need to make sure our decisions are accountable. And we're not brought onto this earth to consume or to produce, to prioritize the economy, to prioritize profit. How are we being accountable to the next 7 generations? I can go on, but I do want to share the space. So I thank you for letting me offer my perspective.
Thank you so much, Kenyon. I'm delighted to hear this. Definitely, it's our system of thought, or at least the Western system of thought, which seems primitive in regards to ancient knowledge. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to give the floor to Jorge Enrique. Tell us, what's your experience about education with the Anatolian people? Do they see it as divided, as we see it in schools here, in the cities, in the Western world?
Yes, thank you for having me again. Your question about Anatolian people is interesting because it's the same that in Colombian people, but we forget why disconnect the same, the nature, the math, the botanica, and then that happen is, for example, that the arts can be this bridge through we walk in the same way. In this sense, I want to share with you an indigenous poetry that in our case constitute a myth of origin for the communities in Colombian Caribbean people. I consider that this is a very good example for education because you can listen how to learn about physics, math, quantic. Then the name is the creation, and that is first there was the sea. Everything was dark. There was no sun, no moon, no people, neither animals or plants. Only the sea was everywhere. The sea was the mother. She was water, and water everywhere. She was river, lagoon, creek, and sea. And so she was everywhere. So first there was only the mother. Her name was Gaucho Bank. The mother was not people or anything. Not anything. She was a Luna. She was the spirit of what was to come. She was thought and memory. Thus, the mother existed only in a Luna, in the lower world, in the deep, alone.
Thank you, Jorge, for sharing this beautiful poem with all of us. I was thinking about when you were reading the poem and thinking about what Kianya said, that maybe there are models of indigenization, there are botanical models for future generations, which appear a long time ago, which belong to ancient wisdom, and which could be shared with people nowadays. So I would like to give the word now to Kiana, because I believe she's precisely now working on a model for indigenous wellness, or a model which could be applied to all of us coming from this ancient wisdom.
Thank you so much, David. I am just going to share my screen here as we discuss a model that's used in the Navajo culture. It's called the Navajo Cultural Wellness Model. And just give me one moment while I bring this up here. So I do want to start with explaining the really vital importance of the 4 directions to the Navajo culture. And so it starts with the east, which is actually at the top. So in Western culture, the north is the north is usually at the cardinal direction that everyone sees at the top. But in the Navajo culture, we start at the east because the sun rises in the east, and so the east is called Ha'a'a in Navajo. And the reason why we begin there is because it represents dawn and birth, the beginning of life, a new beginning of each day, setting goals and intentions, and just developing our mental strengths and capabilities, realizations. And then from there, we move on actually to the north, which is on the right side, which is the Blue Mountain, and that's Nahokos. And then from there, we move to the south, which is Shada'a, and then west, which is E'e'a. And so this is vital to know as I present the wellness model as well, that we always start at the east. And so it goes from the top, which is dawn at the east, as I said, the beginning, and then it's daylight, then it's dusk, and then it's darkness. So let me just bring up the wellness model here. And then I can discuss this template that we have here. So as I said, we start at dawn here, which is Hayoth Koth. And so this is the perspective that we look when we're going around these concentric circles. So we start in the middle here, which is really recognizing yourself and your place in the world, and the introspective wellness. And so we start here with Erehavne, that's thoughts and concerns for self, and that really represents on like how to remember yourself. How do you represent yourself? Do you know your clans, like how Joshua and I introduced ourselves in the beginning, and how do we relate to others? This is how we respect ourselves and others, and then knowing how we can support other people. And then we move to Adat Hododzin, which is having reverence for yourself, honoring your words, your commitments, your parents, your grandparents, the environment, your mind, attitude, and spirit. And then we move to Adat Ahaya, which is taking care of yourself. That's physically, mentally, spiritually, by like eating well, exercising, drinking water, getting rest, taking care of your heart and your brain. And this is the type of physical and mental wellness that like the Western medicine model would think of. And it's just in this one small section here. As you can see, wellness in the Navajo culture is just so holistic, when in Western medicine, it's just siloed into this tiny self here on what they consider self. And then we move on to Adaha Hasin, which is preparing yourself for challenges and knowing your limits, but by managing your stress, your time, stating your vision, your missions, your goals, and objectives. And so this is a part of your just your personal well-being introspectively. And so as you can see, this is just one tiny layer of what we consider holistic wellness in the Navajo culture. So from once you have these concepts really ingrained, then you have to consider, okay, what's your relationship with your kinship? And so kinship can be the people that you're related to by clan, by blood, but it could be much more than that. As you know, a lot of us call each other brothers and sisters, and grandpas and grandmas. We'll just visit an elder that we like had met for the first time, and she'll instantly be a grandma. And so kinship is just, the idea of nuclear family is just so foreign to us, and in a lot of other Indigenous cultures as well. So this is an important concept for us, and recognizing your relationship with your kinship as well is important for the community as a whole. And I feel like that was really showcased in our response in the pandemic. As you know, the Navajo Nation and other tribes around the world where experiencing really high disparities in caseloads and mortality rates as well. And it was just so heartening to see people reflecting back on this really intrinsic tenet within these cultures to find yourself a part of a community and wanting to serve the community and just be there for one another. And then, of course, the last part of the model is our finding our place in the environment and protecting it as well. And as Shie had mentioned earlier, one of the vital parts of climate change, honestly, social and behavioral health, any wellness genre that you can think of is reciprocity and coexistence. I feel like in a lot of these topics that were discussed in the past 2 days, reciprocity and coexistence are really are in alignment with all of the other cultures from around the world. Reciprocity and protecting Mother Earth so that it can nourish you. And that is just something that our society has forgotten, which is that ancestral wisdom that the future needs to carry forward, and coexisting with not just the environment, but other creatures as well. And kind of losing sight of that, like anthropogenic, the tendencies that we have, and not seeing like humans as superior, but living in peace with all the other beings as well. And so this is how we live in the Navajo culture. And like I said, it's really, really vital that we honor the 4 directions as well. So the number 4 is also very important to us as well. And so I'm going to say a prayer that just closes out any kind of discussions like this. It's Hajon Hasli, Hajon Hasli, Hajon Hasli.
Thank you, Kiana. Thank you so much for sharing this inspiring and holistic wellness model, which I can well see can inform our present practice and future practices. I can really see how here ancient models and ancient wisdom can actually inform our present and maybe model in future societies. But you also talk about a struggle, right? And I think you are all championing initiatives across the Americas in order to support Native people in their struggles against mortality rates, against health risks, against loss of sacred sites and loss of traditions. And I would like you to comment on those stories of resistance and resilience. How do these examples help us to better understand and tackle modern societal and environmental issues? Maybe Joshua, Shie, or Canyon, could you comment on this?
Well, I'll push myself in then. I usually want to offer space. I know I've been given many spaces to share my voice, but this really excites me. It is the reason why I started Canyon Consulting, LLC. It's with a K like my name. And in my language, our Ks are K and our Cs are Ch. So honoring language. Canyon Consulting's tagline is bridging the gap between Indigenous and contemporary value systems. It was dominantly to help me operate as a business because a lot of public agencies do not work with individuals. I have been following my mother's footsteps in protecting sacred sites and honoring our ancestors whose resting spaces are desecrated on an ongoing basis in the Bay Area. And we are not federally recognized as a people. So therefore, we do not get any assistance from the government. We are not seen in their eyes at all. And we fight all the time. One quote that my friend shared is, Indigenous people make up less than 5% of the global populace, less than 2% in the Americas or United States of America. Yet Indigenous peoples protect over 85% of the world's biodiverse spaces with little to no backing or support. Now, that being said, when it comes to protecting sacred sites, Here in California, we're very lucky to have California Environmental Qualities Act and NAGPRA, Native American Graves and Repatriation Act. So there are rules and regulations around protecting cultural resources, which are fancy words of talking about my ancestors and their remains and our sacred sites, our places of ceremony. Around that, I am bringing in ways to offer cultural sensitivity training and cultural competency training, because from a simple comparison is, long ago in the workforce, there was a time where men and women who were working together, some behaviors would happen where some community members would not be very proper with each other. And over time, over conversations, there was a collective decision to set in strategies for sexual harassment courses and ways to approach some of these discrepancies between community members who are working together in a professional environment. I try and voice by the work I do around cultural competency training is there once was a time where that wasn't a valued element, and now we are coming to this space where it should be a standard. Cultural sensitivity training, at least when I'm present in a circle, I try and highlight the Indigenous perspective. However, interculturally, we could talk about class, we could talk about systemic injustices, marginalized community members, but we need to bring in everybody to hear the perspectives, like who is not in the room and how are we talking about these things. So cultural competency is really close to my heart, because through that effort, we can voice humility and accountability. Many times I think about the Western settler colonial mindset is primitive in its decision-making, but it's also in a very heady headspace. It doesn't always come from the heart. And when it comes to accountability of decisions, how we are accountable to how we show up, sometimes the way we've been brought up in our education system, there could be shame in, oh, I did something wrong, I don't want to get it wrong again, I don't want to try. Coming and saying, I learned from this, and there were mistakes. However, to ensure that those mistakes will not happen again. I'll use an example of our territory. We are not identified as living people because one guy named Krober wrote, there is no such thing. There is no full-blood Costanoan or Ohlone people, because he was looking with a limited scope, looking for scantily clad Indigenous peoples in a regalia in a time after the Spaniards came through and the missions forcefully enslaved us, stopped us from speaking our languages. We were constantly punished. And then around that time also, when California became Mexico for a short window of time. And then after that, the gold rush, where the United States, California validated genocide in the 1850s, $5 a head, 50 cents a scalp to eradicate the California native. How do you prove you got yourself a native? You hold their scalp or their head. Now, how many Indigenous peoples do you think are going to run around saying, I'm native in that window of time? So when a person comes out of nowhere, well, he was here, but I mean, when someone is looking with a limited scope of, I'm looking for natives, and they're supposedly supposed to meet a standard, they're not going to see him. And the same goes for my elder, my uncle. When someone asks from the outside saying, what kind of native stuff did you do when you were growing up? He would say, we didn't do any native stuff. Yet, because my mother is a little more well-versed in culture sharing environments and code switching in both academic settings and construction and diverse environments, she's able to say, I recognize that the average community member wasn't brought up like I was. So the things that we did differently in our household is part of our community and a part of our culture. And therefore it's different. So even though it was normal to be raised how we were raised, to decipher or to code switch to voice to other people, oh, this is the Indigenous way that my mother brought me up, and this is what we do at these times, and this is how we do these things. Coming of age ceremony or passing or ceremonies or song sharing, sunrise ceremonies. All of these things are just a way of life. And so cultural competency or cultural humility comes in line from as simple as, just like when we think about our LGBTQ and Two-Spirit community members who in all actuality just want to be identified how they self-identify, to honor people's pronouns. Just like when people come at me saying, how do you people want to be called American Indian or Native American? I'm like, did you know that that approach is quite entitled? A reasonable way to come at that inquiry may be, may I ask how you identify? Because my uncle will say he's a proud American Indian. He's an Indian. I don't identify with that term. I recognize it has value in historic and written documentation and even the treaties. So I'm not going to engage in political correctness to say we need to get away from that word.
Sure, and that's when switching codes also work, right?
Exactly.
And you need to be
So
competent in doing this.
Yeah.
Well, this is a very passionate debate, and you are portraying a very realistic. You're giving a very realistic portrait of the situation. It's hard to listen, but I think it's also necessary and a novel scope on the reality. I would like to give the voice now to Shie and know if she can also maybe talk about experiences, if she can also tell us which are these stories of resistance and resilience from Indigenous people, which could also help us to shape our own reality.
Well, thank you for giving me the word, and thank you, Canyon, for sharing. And, I think that I identify with a lot of the things that Canyon said when it comes to, erasing, like actively erasing and trying to erase Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous culture. Because just my grandfather, he doesn't know the language because it was taught that if you identify as Indigenous, then you would suffer more, or you would be discriminated against. So my dad was the one who retook that power of owning your identity and learning traditions and language and ceremonies. And so I was raised in that way, and I'm really grateful for that. And something like I can tell one anecdote of how important Indigenous knowledge is, not only in its spiritual sense, but also for how it can help us move forward in the new technologies that we, want to apply. So, for example, my parents worked at this university, and they wanted to build a new campus on this land that is actually a wetland. And the people from that community, which is right next to mine, said, you can't do this because there is a time of the year where it gets flooded a little bit more, or the land gets unstable because there's actually an aquifer underneath. And the university people said, oh, it doesn't matter. We have experts who did studies and everything is fine. And so they started building the university, and it started to sink just a few months into the project. So that is just one example of many of how Indigenous knowledge actually helps, because we cannot just have a standard for everything around the world. Every piece of land is different. Every community is different. Every people who lives there is different. And so we need to recognize that in whatever project we embark on. We need to make projects inclusive. We need to put people at the table. And something that was mentioned before is that we need to take care of the 7 generations in the future, but we also need to take account of the 7 generations in the past that have left us their teachings and have left us their knowledge. And Indigenous wisdom and Indigenous knowledge is something to protect. And I feel really grateful that I have, learned some from my own parents and my grandparents, so I can share with my generation.
Thank you. Definitely, the forest listens, and the forest needs to be listened to. And as we were talking yesterday and in the previous conference, plants can hear, and plants can also they are sensitive, and they can understand, and we can also learn from the knowledge they have, although they do not speak, they do not use languages as we do. And now that we're talking about sounds and listening, I would like to hear Jorge. I think he has a song for us, if I'm not mistaken. So now that we're talking about sound,
Yeah.
It would be great to listen to you.
Thank you so much. I want to share a story with you because exactly is related with my virtual background, no? Maybe you ask, what is this? Beautiful landscape, but this is the story really. 1000 years ago, in the north of Colombia, there is a community called Zenus. The Zenus was people that live between the water, and in this very beautiful place called today La Mojana, these people turn the activities around crops in these food plains. But 1000 years ago, today, with climate change and with the separation between the education, exactly, it's not easy to find this kind of landscape, and this is the story. In 2012, we, with my master in Indigenous music, started research about the pre-Hispanic musical instrument, more specifically a very beautiful and special flute. Some archaeologists find and put in the gold museum. Maybe I can share 2 or 3 images. I can share my screen. Yes, no. What happened? Because I like to show very special place. If no, doesn't matter. And this story is very interesting because in Bogota, in Colombia, we have the Gold Museum now. Maybe you listen about it. The most important museum in Colombia in terms of heritage gold objects. And inside of the museum, no more public, there is a very special collection of 53 xenoflutes. And my master asked for access to this flute for our research. 1 year, 1 year was the time that after 1 year waiting and one special day in a summer equinox, they allowed us 6 hours of work to take data and do the assessment, capture some sounds in company of the anthropologist and curator of the museums. Okay, and what is the connection between climate change, art, flutes, and the Zenu people and the Mojana place? Maybe you listen this interesting story about how the wolf changed the Yellowstone, no? I understand that maybe we do a parallel and say how one flute maybe can to help to adapt to climate change some people. And the museum have a very special permission for us for do copies, because these flutes is only in the museum, no in the Mojana with the community. And until this moment the flute is only in the museum, and for us the flute is dead and the sound is dead. But with the new copies we never knows how is the technique or the real sound, but we do very special workshops with the community and with some copies of this kind of flutes. And then the invitation is to make visible and to value and rescue this tradition as living solutions that maybe can help to our planet and in this very specific window. And this is the flute, the Seno flute, the Malibu flute, and now you can listen the sound of 1,000 years.
Thank you so much, Jorge. That was absolutely beautiful and inspiring to listen the music of the people of the river, the people of the water of our country. Thank you so much. And well, maybe as a closing remark, I would like to ask Dr. Burbank, do you think a flute or a song can change the world or can help us to change climate?
Yeah, thanks for again letting me have this space. I think there's power in medicine, in our words and our songs and our traditional practices are powerful, and that's the reason why oral tradition is so significant to Indigenous people across the world. I think in Navajo culture, we have chants, we have traditional songs, we have lullabies, we have all kinds of ceremonies and ways to acknowledge some type of phenomenon in the world. And so I think that songs and sounds and language can heal. And I think that's what's missing from all types of education systems and health systems in across the world, is that this very simple act of communication, of song, of voice, that's no longer a priority. It's this kind of outside concept now that becomes the focus in teaching young Native children. So to answer your question, yes, there's power, there's medicine in song, in music.
Thank you, Joshua. Definitely there is power and change in music. I think it is now time to give the voice to those who are in remote locations all around the world and who have asked questions to our panelists. So let's go and listen to those questions.
Thank you, David. Well, so much beauty in all this sharing. We haven't received many questions on the chat, but I think, yeah, a young Coyote woman, if she would like to share more with us about that code switching she was talking about, and how she has embody that in, and how she can see this in her own generation? How did you manage to do that? Thank you.
I recognize my privilege, as I mentioned earlier, being raised in a matrilineal, matriarchal society. My mother and my grandmother have taught me when song, ceremony, and dancing stops, so does the earth. And I truly believe that. Now, when it comes to being a millennial or digital native, not as an Indigenous person, but digital native in the 21st century, there are times that I recognize that my mother is a generation apart from me. We have a generation gap. So I learned how to navigate conversations as a youngster with my own generation and her. And then being raised in Indian Canyon, I didn't identify with my own generation or my peers because my mother exposed me to professors, interns, ceremonial practitioners, and I learned from them as well as from the land. And when we have an opportunity to have that culture sharing, like right now during COVID, my heart is breaking in just simply recognizing that these youngsters who are engaging online digitally, as resilient and as amazing as that is, because I recognize I would not be able to survive in this environment. I learn hands-on very well. I'm neurodivergent, dyslexia, ADHD, a lot of other things messing with my mind. The simplest interaction of culture sharing as a sleepover where a youngster gets to go to another place and see how differently that family or community acts. Because if we're just brought up in our limited mindset and not able to interact with other people to recognize there are other truths that are different from ours, some people aren't getting the best chance to, just even with decision making, to recognize that there are different perspectives. Like if I show my hand to you and I look at my hand, I say there's no such thing as fingerprints. I only see fingernails and knuckles and a little bit. I see the pattern of the skin with a little bit of hair follicles. And if I say that is the only truth, and then when I show you this part of my hand, I'm like, the hand is only this way. And you're sitting here like, you see a palm, you see fingerprints, you see the way the hand bends this way. If I'm only going to offer that limited perspective and say, this is the only truth, I don't have that humility to interact and saying, I recognize this is the only perspective I see. And when I was mentioning when Kroeber came and wrote, and today's society validates written history, academically cited. That's the reason why my people aren't identified correctly. The word Ohlone is an Indigenous word. However, it's a misnomer. The Bay Area has historically been known as Costanoan Ohlone territory, and both of those words are incorrect, all because of our priority of acknowledging the written word as being validated and oral narratives and oral tradition as being invalidated. That's why I like to say Wikipedia is racist against Indigenous peoples, because they don't allow us to cite our oral traditions. The internet is a beautiful space to learn, but also a dangerous space. And I, as a millennial, I was brought up surrounded by this connection, the internet, technology, but I also was raised off the grid without any of that. And I've had a humble upbringing in valuing water, in valuing my electricity sources, in valuing modern amenities very well. And it was very humbling. And I see how people behave when things are normalized or available to them, how entitled they are when they walk in this world, and how negligent they can be. We don't know what we don't know, but if we're brought up in an environment that isn't humble in that sense of accountability, we engage in problematic decision-making practices. Like when I visit classrooms, I talk to youngsters and I say, even if you're a vegetarian, you still need to take a life to sustain your own. My mother taught me, when I am going to harvest, I engage in a humble, accountable, reciprocal fashion. And I think about what ethical and sustainable harvesting methods are the right way to engage with this medicine or this food. I will let that plant know where it is going or how I'm going to use it. I won't take the first buds or the first seeds because those are for the world and our relations. The critters, the winged, the finned, the four-legged, all of these relations, our family, they can go first. An ethical and sustainable harvesting method, I won't take more than a fifth of that plant because the pollinators need that love. To be accountable to knowing where my food comes from. Because I talk to young ones and I say, you impact a life. You have to take a life to sustain your own. That doesn't mean we stop eating and not engage. Yes, we could take the leaves off of kale and cabbage, but we need to take the whole head of broccoli. So these are living beings. These are living systems. Are we recognizing how they're being brought up? Are they being poisoned? Are they being raped, extorted, extracted, pumped up with poison for profit? When I talk about medicine, we use sage, but even pan-Indianism has our own native relations using sage, yet it is not their first medicine of their territory. And people want to use sage for ceremony, and they sometimes go shopping for it. Do they know who's selling it? Because some people are stealing from the land. They're clear cutting sage so they could bundle it. They throw them in plastic bags and bundle it and extract it and disrespect it. And then they package it in plastic so a store can sell it. And that's not in a good way. That's not respecting these living beings. And when people say, oh, I use sage to smudge, is that medicine really respected? Is that medicine going to help you when it was disrespected, disregarded? How are we engaging in the world and how are our actions impacting? When we think about monolithic agriculture, our community has made decisions because, well, I'll use sarcasm. Oh my gosh, I don't like these bugs. So let's poison the water and let's poison this area because I'm annoyed with the bugs. You poison the water, then the birds and the amphibians are now poisoned because you didn't want the bugs, some of the pollinators and some of the food sources for those relatives who help the diverse plant life, who spread the seeds, who help pollinate, because you didn't want a couple of bugs. Or the same when it comes to rat poison. Oh, you don't want rodents invading your space, but you invaded the forest. You don't want rodents invading your space because you're entitled to your space, but guess what? Your poison is going into those little rodents. Those rodents are going out into the wild. Those raptors, those birds of prey, those bobcats, those foxes, those predators are now being poisoned because of an entitled, negligent behavior of, I don't like little rodents. They don't know how to be in right relation to the living systems. Yes, we may not like some of these inconveniences, but there are better ways to make decisions. Yet because we are prioritizing the economy and capitalistic gain, we don't have the legislative practices that are putting rules in recognizing the rights of nature. So I'm really, really frustrated with how we make decisions. When people say, we're feeding the nation, we need all this agriculture and we need these write-offs, I'm like, go to the grocery stores and find out what they do with the food. Oh, they're allowed to write it off and destroy it instead of feeding people because we've allowed an FDA system to destroy food instead of feeding people, either because you don't want to get sued or because you're writing it off and you're not allowed to generate profit. It's backwards. Because these community members have not been raised in accountable, humble, cultural communities. Indigenous peoples have these civil governing structures, these ways of life, social and cultural responsibilities, sacred obligations. And yet people still think we don't exist, and yet people still believe the writings. And yet people want to tap into core shamanism and learn how to become their own shaman and their woo-woo energy so they could sell and profit off of sharing that supposed wisdom, when in all actuality, they're not being accountable to being in community and having community claim you. I am vehemently adamant about these topics. So I'm honored to share space with everyone here, and I'm thankful to share my perspective. And I love connecting with community. So shameless plug, check me out.
Thank you so
this.
much. You're definitely voicing the voice of everyone. This is a system which doesn't respect the source and then expects to be fed by the source. Thank you so much. I think, Eleonora, we have still one more question, right?
Yeah, we have a couple. There's a question for all the panelists. Do they have a lot of friends among their friends that are as passionate as they are? And are these young activists, are they getting support from Indigenous, non-Indigenous groups? If you want to share a bit about that, anyone?
Maybe Kiana, would you like to share your experience on this?
Sure. I'm so sorry. Can you repeat the question again? The first part kind of cut out.
How much support do you have among your generation? And are you also receiving support from other groups? Like maybe when we talk about Indigenous and non-Indigenous groups, like how much support are you getting from maybe non-Indigenous groups in this case?
Mm-hmm. I personally, as a Diné woman, feel really supported at the moment. I think that in a movement within our culture, in the Navajo culture specifically, in a reclamation of sovereignty and a revitalization of our culture and our language preservation as well, that there's been this movement within not just the elders, but even just our previous generation and our parents to want to be able to support us to continue on these important aspects of our culture, and not just, to speak the language, but really to live the Hajon lifestyle, which is about balance and peace and harmony. And I feel that with the No DAPL movement, our environmental justice, or even social determinants of health or discrimination in general, was really brought into the mainstream, where we had garnered a lot of support and attention from other cultures as well. And we have found to have a lot of allies and accomplices that have joined us within the past few years. And it was really showcased again this past year with the pandemic, and just, it's just very, very horrific year. In the last years, the Navajo Nation was hit very hard, but it was just such a beautiful thing to watch people from around the entire world in support of, not just because, they had sympathy or empathy for us, but they really saw the importance of our complete sadness that we were losing elders just constantly last year. And they know that the elders are really centered within their culture because they're the knowledge keepers. And a lot of us were forced into westernized education, and we're forced to forget those things, echoing what Canyon said. And so just having that support from around the world, yeah, we really feel, or at least I can speak for myself, that I do feel held and a little bit more seen in the past year than I ever have. And I really hope that it continues, and that a conference like this can really be a guide for some people who don't really connect with their community or other people in that way, who are in that really individualistic mindset, that this can be a guide for them as well. And that really gives me hope for the future.
Thank you, Kiana. We have one last question here from Sofia from Argentina. She wants to ask Shie. So Shie, do you see hope for this times? And what would be your message of hope?
Well, thank you for that question, Eleonora and Sophia. And, I think that hope is a very tricky term. for me, it's a term as ambiguous as peace, right? We know the feeling, we know what it smells like, we know what we want it to feel like, but it's hard to put it into words. So the way that I frame hope in the past is that you cannot be hopeful without first taking action. So you cannot sit down and be hopeful all day and hoping, that something is going to happen or something is going to change. The times in which we get hopeful, in which we are re-energized, is when we take action. When I testify at City Hall about the need for climate education, I get hopeful about the future. When we strike with over 7 million people around the world for climate justice, I get hopeful. When I see people in support of, for example, the Navajo Nation during COVID times, when it, like you mentioned, Kiana, it was hit really hard, I get hopeful. So it's not really something that can happen before we take action. And I guess that the message of hope is to be stubborn optimist about the future. And this is a term that I coined from Christiana Figueres, who is one of the architects from the Paris Agreement. And she mentions, we have to be stubbornly optimistic about the future. We need to believe in our power to change the world. We need to believe in our power of agency, of how today affects tomorrow. And I think that we all get lost in that timeline. And somebody once told me, if you want to know why we are where we are right now in the present, look at your past. And if you want to know where you want to be, look at what you're doing every day. So my message of hope is to take that power of agency, to take charge of the possibility of changing the world every single day with every single action. And once we change our mindset to that, once our mindset becomes reciprocity, once our mindset becomes Mother Earth, once our mindset becomes, I like to call it climate activism. Once our mindset is that, then everything will come and flow naturally, and peace will come and hope will come. So I guess that is my message. How can you take charge of your day to improve the world and your own spirit?
So action provides hope. That's a very powerful message. Thank you so much. Thank you to you all. Thank you, Kiana, Kenyon. Thank you, Shia. Thank you, Jorge, Joshua. I'd like to remind you that we're going to have 2 conferences every year, on May and September. And then there's, of course, one triennial one in February 2024. If you or anyone else wants to volunteer, you can reach us to volunteer for specific projects within your own community. And we will try to provide external support whenever it is possible. So thank you very much for being here. But before closing, I would like to give the floor again to Shia, so she can make the closing ceremony, and she can make a prayer with all of us.
Thank you. So I'm just going to do a short prayer so we can close the space. Makikmu, Great Spirit, Makita, Mother Earth, we acknowledge the original nations and all beings of the 4 directions. We acknowledge the 4 sacred elements, the sacred water, Tsidehe, the sacred fire, Tsitsibi, the sacred wind, Minthe, and the sacred earth, Makita. We greet the 4 directions and the heart of Father Sky and the heart of Mother Earth. We give thanks for this beautiful day and the sharing of good thinking and good actions with good spirits and good feelings. Mwashning Tini, walking together for the care of life. Kamadi, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. And well, thank you everyone for joining the 7th ICCS International Conference and Gathering for the Elders of the Elders. I'm sure this has been an inspiring experience for all participants, public around the world. It's your cooperation which help us keep alive inquisitive spirit to stimulate the mind and stimulate the body and stimulate the soul, and work for a better present, gathering the teachings of the past and making them alive, bringing them back alive again for the present and the future. So we invite you to join us in the following events with more exciting insights about cross-cultural cooperation and, of course, about global well-being. Thank you very much. Bye.
And Kurji, are we done? Yeah.
We are not live, right, anymore.
Are we live? Are we still live? I hope no. Wow. So inspiring. Okay. Eleonora, Kurji, Tarun, all the panelists, Samitra G, David, thank you so much for this closing talk, dialogue. It was super powerful in all ways. The messages, the interconnection between all of us. And that's right. This is just the first excuse to come together, and we look forward to keep meeting each other, gathering, and cooperating just to keep in our paths and the work that we're all doing. So Mitrajit, is there anything would you like to share before we finish?
I just want to echo your sentiments, Adrianaji. It was the most powerful session. I think it was really, really wonderful. All the panelists, thank you very much. And I think I want to say the theme of the first conference in 2003, which I think is a Native American saying, Mitakwe Oyasin, that we are all related. And I think that's a wonderful way of saying and maybe closing today's session also. So it was wonderful to meet all of you virtually. Hopefully we can actually get together sometime and share the bond even further. So thank you so much.
Thank you, CJ. Thank you, everyone.